In a courtroom full of tense silence, something completely unexpected happened. A young boy, barely more than a teenager, stood up, interrupting the judge as he was about to pass a decision. With all eyes on him, the boy uttered just 2 words, words that made the judge freeze, his face draining of color. For a moment, the entire courtroom was caught in stunned silence. The judge, known for his unshakable composure, couldn't hide his shock. Why did this simple statement affect him so deeply? What could possibly have been said to send chills down the spine of someone who has seen it all? In this video, we dive into the story of that fateful moment when a boy's words changed everything. Stay tuned to find out what those 2 words were and how they shook the very foundation of the courtroom. To understand why this moment was so shocking, we need to look at the situation unfolding in that courtroom. The boy, named Jason, had been a key witness in a high-profile case that had captivated the entire community. It was a case filled with intrigue and mystery, involving powerful figures, hidden secrets, and a long-buried truth that no one dared to speak of. Jason had been reluctant to testify, but his involvement was crucial. For days, the courtroom buzzed with rumors about what he might reveal. Was he hiding something? Had he seen or heard something dangerous? As the trial progressed, the pressure on him grew. Lawyers tried to break him, the judge stayed stern, and the audience waited with bated breath. But no one could have predicted that, in a moment of pure spontaneity, Jason would drop 2 simple words that would stop everything in its tracks. Everyone, from the defense to the prosecution, was left questioning. What did Jason? As the silence in the courtroom stretched on, people began to exchange uneasy glances. The judge's hands trembled slightly as he glanced down at his notes, his usually confident demeanor crumbling. Jason stood motionless, his eyes locked on the judge, as if waiting for something, a response, an acknowledgement, or maybe even a reaction he hadn't expected. Meanwhile, the defense attorney, a sharp and calculated figure, leaned forward, trying to gauge the situation. He had been waiting for a moment like this, an opening, something to use in his favor. But what Jason had just said wasn't something he had prepared for. From the back of the room, Jason's mother watched with wide, worried eyes. She knew her son had always been a quiet, reserved boy, but there was something different about him now. Was this a cry for help? Or had he learned something too dangerous to ignore? She couldn't shake the feeling that Jason was caught up in something far beyond his control. The prosecutor, a woman with years of courtroom experience, had seen her fair share of surprises, but nothing quite like this. Her brow furrowed as she took careful note of every detail. Was Jason's testimony now compromised? Had those 2 words exposed a deeper connection, one that could alter everything they thought they knew about the case? She wasn't sure, but one thing was clear. They were no longer just in a fight for justice. They were now in a battle to uncover the truth. With the rules still hanging in suspense, the judge finally cleared his throat, his face pale but resolute. He knew this moment would shake the entire trial, but even he couldn't anticipate how far the ripples of those 2 words would go. Was it the slip of the tongue? Or had Jason just opened a door to something far more dangerous? The clock ticked on, and everyone in the room could feel the tension thickening. Something was about to change, and no one was prepared for what came next. A no that could shake the very core of the trial. The courtroom had fallen into an eerie quiet, the kind of silence that presses down on you, making your heart race. Every eye was on Jason. His 2 words had thrown everything off balance, and no one knew how to move forward. The judge's voice, when he finally spoke, was shaky but firm. "Young man, I'm going to need you to elaborate," he said, his gaze now unwavering. But Jason didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stared at the judge, his lips trembling as if weighing the consequences of what he was about to say. The tension in the air was almost suffocating. The prosecutor, whose calm exterior had been her shield throughout the trial, was now visibly rattled. She shifted in her seat, glancing nervously at her colleagues. Had Jason just unknowingly handed them a way out, or had he just tied them all into a much darker web? Jason's mother, seated in the front row, looked on with a mixture of fear and confusion. She had no idea what her son had meant by those two words, but she could feel something had changed. He wasn't the same boy she had raised, and she wondered if he had been keeping secrets from her all along. The judge's voice broke through the thickening tension. "I'm giving you one more chance to explain yourself, Jason," he said, his tone more urgent now. Jason's eyes flickered for a moment, his mind clearly struggling with the weight of the moment. The entire courtroom was waiting, holding its collective breath, waiting for that single moment that could change everything. And then, in the silence, Jason finally spoke again, but his voice was barely audible. The words he said next seemed to hang in the air, their impact slow to hit, but undeniable. The prosecutor's face turned pale, her eyes wide with realization. The defense attorney's mouth went dry, and even the judge's calm exterior faltered. It was clear. Jason had just put them all in a position they hadn't been prepared for. The question was no longer if things were about to change, but how badly they would be affected. Just as the courtroom hung on Jason's every word, a sharp noise cut through the tension, an unexpected interruption. A man, dressed in a plain dark suit, suddenly stood up in the back of the room. His sudden movement startled everyone, and for a moment, no one knew who he was or what he wanted. He wasn't supposed to be there. The guards quickly moved toward him, but before they could act, the man raised his hands, signaling that he wasn't a threat. "I have information about the case," he said, his voice calm but firm. The words hit like a jolt of electricity. The prosecutor, still shaken from Jason's revelation, now turned to face the stranger, her eyebrows furrowed in confusion. What was this man doing here? And why hadn't anyone recognized him? The judge, visibly perturbed, motioned for the man to remain silent, but the air in the room had already shifted. Whispers spread like wildfire among the spectators, each person wondering if this man was connected to the case in ways they hadn't imagined. Was he an insider? A witness with crucial evidence? Or was he something far more dangerous? "I know what the boy said," the man continued, glancing at Jason, his eyes hard. "But it's not the whole truth. He doesn't know everything, yet." His words landed heavily, each syllable adding weight to the already thick atmosphere. Jason's eyes widened. His hand clenched the side of the witness stand, his previous calm beginning to slip. Was this man telling the truth? Was there something even darker hidden in the case? And what did he mean by yet asterisk? The boy had only spoken 2 words, but those words seemed to have opened a door, one that now threatened to swallow everyone in the room. The stranger's gaze shifted, locking onto the defense attorney, then the prosecutor, and finally to the judge. "You've all been played," he said, the room falling even quieter. "And you're about to learn how deep this goes." The judge's face tightened, but he didn't speak. The tension had reached a boiling point. How was this man connected to everything? And what did he know that could change everything Jason had just revealed? The stakes had escalated, and the mystery surrounding the case deepened. No one in that room was prepared for the twist that had just landed in their midst. The courtroom, once a place of measured words and calculated arguments, was now a battleground for truths that no one was ready to confront. The courtroom was on edge. The stranger's words hung in the air, thick with tension. Jason's heart pounded as he looked at the man, now standing confidently, as if he had control of the room. The defense and prosecution both shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure of where this new revelation was leading. The judge, trying to regain control, demanded silence, but the murmurs continued to ripple through the crowd. Jason could feel his hands shaking. He wasn't ready for this. None of them were. He had thought he knew the truth, but now it seemed as though everything he had been told, everything he had witnessed, was being questioned. The boy swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper as he spoke. "What do you mean?" The man smiled grimly. "You don't know the full story, kid. You've been kept in the dark." He glanced at the judge, then the prosecutor, before his eyes locked onto the defense attorney. "But I know. I've always known." Suddenly, it all clicked for Jason. The man wasn't just a random outsider. He was a key player in this entire mess. He was someone who had been working in the shadows, pulling strings, and manipulating the events that had led them all to this courtroom. Jason's mind raced, remembering the odd looks he'd gotten from the people around him, the strange warnings from people he'd trusted. Everything was falling into place. Before anyone could react, the stranger stepped forward, his voice steady. "The case you're all so eager to close, it's only the beginning. What you think you know is nothing compared to the real story, the one that's been buried for years."